Welcome, everyone, to a deep dive that I think you're going to find really intriguing. We're going to be talking about Michael Jackson's death.
Yeah, it's one of those things that just grabs you, because officially he died from a propofol overdose given to him by his doctor, Conrad Murray. But
There's always a but.
always a but. A lot of people just don't buy that story.
It is strange to think about. I mean, you have this global superstar, the king of pop, getting ready for this huge comeback tour, and then boom, he's gone.
Just like that. And it's not just that he was famous. His music really resonated with people on a deep level. So when he died, it was like this massive shockwave.
And when something that big happens, people naturally start asking questions. I mean, they want answers.
They want to understand, and sometimes the official explanation just doesn't feel enough.
Right. So before we go down the rabbit hole of theories, let's just take a minute to talk about Michael Jackson's legacy. He wasn't just a pop star, was he?
Oh, absolutely not. Michael Jackson was a cultural phenomenon. I mean, he broke down so many barriers in the music industry, changed the way we look at music videos. His impact is still felt today.
So when he died, it wasn't just his fans who felt it. It was like the whole world went into mourning.
Definitely. And for a lot of people, that grief turned into a search for answers. They couldn't accept that someone so iconic could just be gone.
So let's talk about those alternative explanations. One of the biggest ones out there is that Michael Jackson was murdered. Where does that theory come from?
Well, there's this idea that maybe someone in his inner circle, business partners or even family, wanted him silenced.
Silenced, you mean? Like he knew something he shouldn't have.
Exactly. Or maybe they stood to gain financially from his death. Think about his estate, his music catalog, all that. There's a lot of money involved.
So the motive could be revenge, greed, or a combination of both.
Possibly. And don't forget, Jackson had some financial troubles at the time. Some people believe his death was actually more profitable for certain individuals than his life ever was.
That's chillin'. So you have these whispers of betrayal, money, power struggles. It's no wonder people latched onto the murder theory.
It's like a real-life thriller, right? And then you have the other big theory, the one that's even more out there, the theory that he faked his own death.
Oh yeah, that one. The idea that he's still out there somewhere, living a quiet life under a new identity.
Right, like he just needed to escape all the pressure, the scrutiny, maybe even legal issues.
But how could someone as famous as Michael Jackson just vanish? And how could he stay hidden for so long?
It does seem pretty impossible, but for some people, that tiny sliver of what if is enough. They want to believe he's still out there.
I get that. It's like holding on to a little bit of hope, especially when you've lost someone you admire.
And the internet plays a big role in this. It's easy to find information or misinformation that supports whatever theory you're drawn to.
It's like an echo chamber, isn't it? You find people who think like you, and suddenly the theory feels even more real.
Exactly. So you have these two big theories, murder and faked death. But then there's the question of his doctor, Dr. Conrad Murray, who was found guilty of involuntary manslaughter.
Yeah, but even with a conviction, some people still have doubts. Like, maybe he wasn't the only one responsible.
That's where things get really murky. Some people believe he was a scapegoat, that he took the fall for a bigger conspiracy.
Wow. So maybe he was pressured into giving Jackson the propofol. Or maybe he was just a pawn in some bigger game.
It's hard to know for sure, but you have to remember this was Michael Jackson's personal physician. There was supposed to be a level of trust there.
So even though he was convicted, some people still can't reconcile that trust with what happened. It just doesn't add up for them.
Right, and that's what fuels the speculation. People are trying to piece together the missing pieces to understand the whole picture.
Okay, so you've got these theories swirling around, but what about the evidence? What are people actually pointing to as proof for these alternative explanations?
Well, that's the thing. A lot of it is what you'd call circumstantial. It's more about connecting the dots, interpreting things in a way that fits a certain narrative.
So not exactly hard evidence then. More like trying to put together a puzzle without all the pieces.
Yeah, kind of like that. And since there's no clear-cut proof, it leaves a lot of room for interpretation. Like, someone might say that Jackson's financial troubles were a motive for murder, but that doesn't actually prove anyone killed him. Right?
Right, it just raises suspicion.
Exactly. And then you got to think about where this information is coming from. A lot of it is online, forums, blogs, that kind of thing. Not always the most reliable sources.
So it's easy to get caught up in all the speculation without stopping to think if it's even true.
Oh, totally. And I think that's part of the appeal. It's like people become these amateur detectives trying to solve the mystery themselves.
It's almost like a collective effort to make sense of it all. Especially with someone like Michael Jackson, who meant so much to so many people.
Definitely. That need for closure, for an explanation, it's a powerful thing.
Okay, so let's dig into some of those supposed pieces of evidence. With the murder theory, what kind of things are people pointing to?
Well, you hear a lot about inconsistencies in witness statements, or maybe someone close to Jackson acting strange in the days before his death. People are looking for any little hint that something was off.
So even tiny details can become suspicious when you're looking for them.
Exactly. And the internet makes that even worse. Like someone might make a random comment in an interview, or there's a blurry photo taken outside Jackson's house, and suddenly it's evidence for some people.
Like a giant game of telephone where the story gets twisted more and more with each retelling.
Exactly. And that's why it's so important to take a step back and think critically. Like, who's saying this? What's their agenda? Is there any real proof?
Right, because it's easy to get lost in all the theories without asking yourself if you actually believe them.
It's about wanting to believe, sometimes, more than anything else.
Okay, so we got all this information or misinformation flying around online. But what about the official investigation? Didn't they find a lot of evidence to support the propofol overdose story?
They did. The official investigation was really thorough. I mean, they had medical records, they talked to witnesses, they did forensic analysis. Everything pointed to the fact that Jackson died from a propofol overdose given by Dr. Murray.
But some people say even with all that evidence, there are still some unanswered questions. Things that don't quite make sense.
That's true. There always are in cases like this, especially when it's someone as high profile as Michael Jackson. But I think we need to be careful about the difference between genuine questions and speculation that's driven by conspiracy theories.
So how do you tell the difference?
Well, a real unanswered question is usually based on facts, on evidence. Like, someone might ask why a certain person wasn't interviewed or why a piece of evidence wasn't looked at more closely. Those are valid questions.
But that's different from saying the whole investigation was a cover-up without any proof.
Right, it's about looking at the evidence objectively, considering different viewpoints, but not jumping to conclusions or believing theories without solid evidence.
And I imagine that's hard to do in a case like this, where emotions are so high. People loved Michael Jackson. They were devastated when he died. It's natural to want answers, to want to blame someone.
Oh, absolutely. And when you combine that grief with how appealing a good conspiracy theory can be, it's a potent mix. It's like those theories offer a sense of control when everything else feels chaotic and unexplainable.
And we can't forget about the media's role in all of this. Michael Jackson's relationship with the media was complicated, wasn't it?
It was. I mean, he was one of the most famous people on the planet, but he was also very private. And the media often took advantage of that, especially in the years leading up to his death.
There were always scandals, accusations, sensationalized headlines. It's almost like they created this image of him as both a global icon and a troubled soul.
And that duality definitely played into the narratives that emerged after his death. People were already primed to believe there was more to the story, that something wasn't right.
So even before he died, there was this air of mystery around him, this sense that there were secrets hidden beneath the surface.
Exactly. And the media both fed into that and profited from it.
And then when he died so suddenly, it was like all that pent-up speculation exploded.
It was like the perfect storm. You had the shock, the grief, the media frenzy. It created this fertile ground for conspiracy theories to take root.
It's like his life was already this unfolding drama, and then his death became the final tragic act.
And in that final act, everyone became a screenwriter trying to come up with their own version of the ending.
Okay, so we've talked about murder, fake death, Dr. Murray, the evidence, the media. But there's another piece of this puzzle that I find really interesting. Why people believe in conspiracy theories in the first place.
That's a really important point. It's not enough to just debunk the theories. We need to understand what drives people to believe them. What needs are they fulfilling?
So why are we so drawn to these alternative explanations, even when they might not make logical sense?
Well, part of it is our human need to find patterns, to make sense of the world around us. We're always looking for connections, especially when something as shocking as a celebrity death happens.
It's like we're trying to impose order on something that feels random and chaotic.
Right. And conspiracy theories often provide that order. They give us a simple, often compelling explanation for events that might otherwise seem meaningless.
So instead of accepting that sometimes bad things just happen, we look for a villain, for a master plan.
Exactly. It's a way of regaining a sense of control when we feel powerless. And in the case of Michael Jackson, there's also this desire to protect his legacy, to believe he wasn't responsible for his own downfall.
So the conspiracy theories become a way to shield him from blame, to preserve this image of him as a flawless icon.
In a way, yes. It's like saying he couldn't have possibly made those mistakes. Someone must have done this to him. It allows fans to hold on to that idealized version of Michael Jackson.
That's fascinating. It really shows how powerful our emotional needs can be, how they can sometimes override logic and reason.
Definitely. And in a world where we're constantly bombarded with information, where it's hard to know what to believe, it's more important than ever to understand these psychological mechanisms. to recognize how our own biases and desires shape the way we see the world.
It's a reminder that critical thinking isn't just about evaluating the evidence. It's about understanding our own internal processes.
Exactly. And I think that leads us nicely into the next part of our conversation, where we'll look at the bigger implications of these conspiracy theories, how they reflect not just on Michael Jackson's death, but on how we deal with information and truth in the digital age.
So we've been talking about all these theories around Michael Jackson's death, but it feels like this goes beyond just one celebrity, doesn't it? It's like a window into how we deal with information in general, especially when something big and tragic happens.
It really does. I mean, here you have the official story based on investigations and court proceedings. But then online, you have this whole other universe of explanations and theories. It's like truth itself has become fragmented.
And it seems like the bigger the celebrity, the more intense that online speculation gets. With Michael Jackson, it's like his death created this void that everyone else to fill with their own interpretations.
Exactly. And the internet gives those interpretations a place to spread and grow. It's like a global think tank, but where every bit of information, whether it's true or not, gets dissected and debated.
Yeah, and that's where things get tricky, right? On the one hand, it's good that people can have these discussions and share their perspectives. But on the other hand, there's this real danger of misinformation taking over. People can get so caught up in theories that have no basis in reality.
Absolutely. Finding that balance between encouraging open discussion and promoting critical thinking is the real challenge. It's about helping people be curious and ask questions, but also being able to sort through information and figure out what's actually credible.
So it's not about shutting down the conversation altogether. It's about giving people the tools to navigate it in a smarter way.
Exactly. It's about media literacy, helping people understand how information gets presented and how to spot bias, how to tell the difference between a trustworthy source and one that's maybe not so reliable.
And I think that's even more important when we're dealing with something that emotionally charged as a celebrity death. People are hurting, they want answers, and in that state, they might be more likely to cling to explanations that fit their existing beliefs, even if those explanations aren't really supported by facts.
You hit the nail on the head. Grief can really cloud our judgment, and when you add in how alluring a good conspiracy theory can be, that feeling of uncovering hidden truths, it can be a powerful combination.
So it goes beyond just logic and evidence. It's about understanding the human element, the need to make sense of a tragedy, to find someone or something to blame.
Absolutely. And I think that's why it's so crucial to approach these conversations with empathy, not to dismiss people who believe in these theories, but to try to understand why they might be drawn to them, what need those theories are fulfilling for them.
It's about having a real conversation, not just an argument. Recognizing that people can look at the same information and come to different conclusions, and that's okay.
Right. It's about respecting different viewpoints while also holding on to facts and evidence as our compass.
I think that's a really good point to end on. Michael Jackson's death, and all the theories surrounding it, remind us that truth can be messy and complicated. There are often many layers to a story, and it's up to each of us to engage with that complexity thoughtfully, critically, and with an open mind.
I couldn't agree more. It's a reminder that we all play a part in shaping the stories that define our world, and about responsibility means being informed, being discerning, and being compassionate in our search for understanding.
Well, that's about all the time we have for today. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the mysteries surrounding Michael Jackson's death. We hope you found it insightful, and maybe it even sparked some new thoughts about how we all process information and grapple with belief in a world that's overflowing with it.
It's been a pleasure discussing this with you. Until next time, 18 ATI.